Good morning and welcome back to Planner Craft. I'm Natalie and today we're going to be doing a cake topper. So Ian is here monitoring comments, so don't forget to say hi to him too. Say hi, let us know that you're watching. If you have any questions at any point, then don't be afraid to ask. There's no such thing as a silly question. So I've started a new document that is the same size as the active area of the ScanNCut. So if you are using a silhouette or a Cricut, you would size that according to your machine. So with that done, I'm going to be using Illustrator today, but everything that I'm doing you can also do in Affinity, so there's going to be nothing that is going to be amazingly difficult for you to recreate in Affinity.
Morning, Carol.
What's Carol saying?
Good morning, Nat and boyfriend.
How
How are we both today? Right.
You look a little tired, sweet. You look a little tired. Okay, so with cake toppers, what we essentially usually have is something like a basic shape onto which we're going to build our layers, and then typically you'll have text and then you'll have design icons that are going to give that cake topper a theme. So the bits we're going to concentrate on today is the base and the text, because I already have the other elements designed and they will be coming to a blog piece.
Your mum says morning
Very
and
soon.
Deb says morning.
Morning Mum, morning Deb. So let's get started. So I'm going to start off with just a basic circle, so we can press and hold shift to draw our circle. If you're using Illustrator you can just click as well, so if you know what size you want your circle to be you can just click once and then enter a size, like so. And then ideally you need a kind of stick to come down the bottom that is actually going to go into your actual cake pull. So to do that I'm just going to grab my rectangle tool and I'm just literally going to draw a rectangle like so. Now if we go into transform we can see the width of that. Now if you want to work in millimeters that's fine too, so I can swap, so I'm just going to put up my rulers and we can just right click and change to millimeters. It tends to help when you're designing small things. And if we go back to transform we're going to see that it's changed to millimeters. So 1 centimetre is about right, isn't it, Ian, for our cake pull?
Yeah.
So with those two shapes there I'm just going to line those up. So when we have that pink line that's going to be lined up to the centre, and you're going to have something similar to that if you are working in Affinity too. So now I'm going to go to my node tool, which is A on the keyboard, or you can just click on it in your panel. And I'm going to click and drag over the bottom two nodes. So in Affinity you will need to go to convert to shape before you can access this, and you're going to use your corner rounder tool. But in Illustrator we can just do it straight with that node tool, and we're going to give it a nice rounded bottom. And once we've done that, just want to weld all of that together so that we have a base to put it to. But before you do that, grab yourself a copy and just pop it over to the side, doesn't matter where, just so you've got it as a reference. Then we can go to Pathfinder and we can weld it. So in Affinity you'll find all your operations up in this top section of the screen, and you can use weld in there, so it's all one shape. So now we have a frame that we can pop on top. At the moment it's behind, so if we go into our layers palette and we can see that there's our path, which is the one with the welded stick, and this one is still saying it's an ellipse. so we can bring that one up to the top, and then that's going to slot over there. So this base piece I recommend cutting from some very stiff acetate, so you can get some nice craft plastic from Amazon. So you want something that's got a good weight to it so that it can hold up everything we're going to build on top. With our circle, we're going to start to create a frame. So we're going to need another circle. So again, I'm going to go back to our ellipse tool, and we can just draw. Now I'm just going to go from the edge of the circle there to the edge of the circle there. It's not going to be perfectly centered, but it's close enough. Now we can move it so they're centered. With those two like that, we can then use our pathfinder and subtract. So in terms of where you'd be on affinity, you want to subtract from this top edge, or you can right click on it, go down to geometry and go from there. So now we have a frame, so if I hover over here, you can see that we can see straight through the middle, which is what we want. It's the same size as our acetate underneath, so we can go from there. So typically when you're doing a cake topper, usually it's made of lots and lots of layers to give you lots and lots of depth. So with our frame, I'm going to do a couple of offsets now. If you are working in Affinity, you are going to want to duplicate that frame and then use the contour tool for this next bit. I'm going to go to offset path, and we can go outside, and that's going to create a new frame on the outside. We can go OK. So let's put some colours into this so we can start to see what's actually going on. So if I go to my swatches, and these don't need to be the colours that you're actually going to cut it in, it's just so that we can see what's going on. So let's swap that round. There we go. And I'm just going to take the stroke off of that. So we have one layer, which is our original layer in the red, and let's colour that one yellow, and there we go. So we now have the start of our frame. So that yellow layer is now slightly larger than our frame. Now if you're tempted to go, right, okay, I need to line that all to centre as I'm building up, you're going to find that that original centre is wrong, so just move it up a bit and you should be alright there. So far so good. And you can build as many of those frame layers as you want. Sometimes you're going to want more, so if you're not going to put too many design elements on, you can go for more layers to make it a bit more polished. But for now, 2 is enough. Morning, Linda. So now we need a word. And that word could be anything. So it could be a person's name. It could be that you're going to put the event on there. It could be that it's something to do with the theme. So like if you're doing a London themed set of cakes, it might be that you put London as your text. But for now, I'm going to start off with a name. Now, if you are doing a lot of these cake toppers, and they're all for the same event, start with your longest name first. It's really important so that you don't end up with like a match of sizes of text. So start with the longest, and then the second one I would recommend doing is the shortest, and then you can kind of figure everything out in between a lot easier. So with that typed in, I'm going to set the size. So if I press and hold shift, I'm going to keep it in proportion, and then we can change font. So you want it so that your name can fit easily across, and because it's our longest name, we actually want it to go a little bit bigger. Okay, so I'm going to choose a nice font.
Carol's asked if it's going to be for your mummy.
Yeah. It helps that Mum has a nice long name. So I'm going to go for this particular font, Casey Bold. And I'm going to set it over to one side because there's going to be a little bit of work that we're going to need to do. The other thing that I like about Mum's name is that it has lots of eyes in it, so we have the issue with the dots. So it's a good one to show as an example, so that we're not losing the dots off the eyes. Okay, so with that done, I'm going to zoom into my text. Now, Illustrator is very clever with text. It can work out usually what you mean to do in terms of finding alternate characters. So if I highlight a letter, it's likely to tell me, if it feels like it, any alternates that I might be able to choose. It might be that the font doesn't have any. Whereas if you're working in Affinity and you want to choose an alternate, you're going to need to open your glyph browser, which you can find in the Studio menu. And I believe if we go down to type, we can also get to a glyph browser in Illustrator. There you go. So you can see that we can go to alternates, and that's why it's not giving us any, because it can't see one. But typically, the more expensive the font was in the first place, the more likely you are to have alternates. And also, if it's a script font, you are more likely to get alternates than if it's a serif or sans serif font. Okay, so there's no alternates, but that doesn't mean to say we can't have a little bit more fun with it. So let's see if I can get to the tools that I want. Type. That one. There we go. So let's get rid of that for a minute. And we have the touch type tool. So everything that I'm going to do now, if you are working in Affinity, you are going to want to do through your character panel, and you're going to be able to resize individual letters. So I'm just going to take this one up. And we can move this one down. So that's using your baseline shift in your character panel. And there we go. Okay, but when we're resizing text, you're going to see that now this character looks bolder than the rest of the text. And that's just because as you size text up, it's going to keep that same proportion. So how can you fix it? What you can do is you can convert it to curves, then use your contour tool in Affinity or your offset path in Illustrator to actually bring that line inside. But before you do that, make sure that you've done everything else you want to do with your text first, because it's kind of non-reversible, so you can't edit your text after. Now the benefit of using the touch type tool is that everything at the moment is still text. So if I move this around, I can change character. So what I would say is, if you're doing lots of names, do all your text edits first and try and do all your names as a list underneath, so that you can make sure that you are consistent. Okay, so if we go to the A, we can check. And there is an alternate, but it's basically putting it into a superscript, which is like the square on your squared, where you've got a little character up here. So it's not ideal for what we want. Okay. So likewise, the T is not there, but that's okay. So let's say that's it, I'm happy with that text. It kind of flows all right. There's bits that I want to change, like the T and the I, but we can go from there. So I'm going to go back to my move tool. I'm going to go to type, create outlines, or convert to curves if you're working in Affinity. And you can see that we've got all these tails that are overlapping. So to get that to cut properly, we need to do a weld, like so. And we're going to put that all into one. So if we go into our layers palette at the moment, you're going to see that when we did that weld, it's put it as a group. And that's because Illustrator can't weld non-overlapping items like Affinity can. So that is why more often than not you'll see me working in Affinity, is that it's a lot easier to kind of lock things in place that aren't touching. So good one to bear in mind when we're working and choosing which software to go for. Okay, so I've got my text there and I've converted it. So now we can actually go and break it down. So if we see here in our group, we've got our compound powerful on its own, which is our capital letter. So remember how I said about using offset path? This is when we're going to do it. So object path and then offset. Now we want to go inside, so we're going to start with a negative, and it's only going to be a little bit, so I'm going to do -1 mil, and let's try that. So if we click into where it says mighty limit, it's going to do a preview for us, so we can check that our weight then looks a little bit better. I might just take it down just a little bit more so we can go to a 0.5 and test that. Now if we look here, it's getting a bit too thin and it's totally missing here, so we know that that's too far and it can't handle it. So let's get back to our 1 and we'll stick there. So if we look at these bits here, and we can go OK. So now we have 2 C's and we can hide the big one. Now the reason that I hide rather than delete is so that I can check that I'm happy with how that new shape is looking. So it might be that we go, actually it's still looking a bit too thin, even when we compared that bit to that bit, it's just a bit too thin. So let's get rid of that one. Go back to our original and we can go object path offset, and let's go to -0.75, and it's going to be that little bit stronger. Go OK, hide the original, and that's looking much better. So now we can go and delete that. Now next bit, we want to check that we're absolutely happy with the placement of our word before we start building our layers. So if you like where the sea is now, but you want to put more of a flourish on the sea, you can do that. So basically this is how I would do it. If we go into the node tool, I'm just going to select the swoosh nodes as much as possible here. So let's try and get those bits, and we can actually then resize. So if I go to the move tool, it's not going to do it for me today. Yesterday it was doing it fine. No, come on, I want to do those ones. No, it's not going to do it. Okay. Yeah, I was using MacBook, so it was behaving yesterday. Today it doesn't want to. But if you're working in Affinity, highlight the nodes, and then there's one that does like little transform handles at the top. It looks kind of like that one, but it's not actually that tool. And then you can actually drag it up. So I don't want to set group. Come on, let me do what I want to do. It's not going to let me today. Yeah. So if it won't let you do that, there's horses for courses. So we will make sure that you just get that C. And if we double click on it, we can get it into isolation mode on Illustrator. So basically the rest of our word is locked, therefore. So I'm going to come in here and let's draw a bit of a flourish. So I need a pencil tool. Where I can find it. There we go. You can tell that I usually get used to use my keyboard shortcuts. So I want to draw, so it flourishes a bit more up here. So I'm going to use this as a kind of start and end point. I'm going to draw that in there. And I want it to come round there and back down here, like so. And the good news is Illustrator is pretty clever at working out what you actually mean rather than interpreting all that handshaking as overflowing. So we'll smooth it out for you, and then we can go, okay, this bit's alright, that bit's alright up to there, this bit is a bit dodgy in the middle. So I'm just going to do a little bit of tweaking to get that where I want it. There we go. And likewise down here, just smooth that out now. And we have our extra flourish. So we're going to double click back out of that, and that's going to then take us back out of that isolation mode. And let's go into the main part of our word, and we can use exactly the same system again. So if I go in here, we can see all of our nodes. We can go to our pencil tool and we can go, okay, I want to do something that looks like this. Do you have to get it right first time? No, you don't. Okay, so that's not too bad, but I want it to get a bit thicker up here. So let's smooth that out for starters. There we go. So now we have that. Now, in here at the moment, we've got a bit of an overlapping issue with our word. Just make sure that you weld it. So otherwise, if you hadn't done that particular process, number one, Canvas is going to be throwing a hissy fit in silent while you're actually importing this, and it's going to go, but the paths overlap, that's not right, I can't do that. So just making sure that we weld that is going to be best practice, so that we're not causing issues further down the line. Now you'll notice that I've done this in isolation mode, so it's ignoring the dots on our eye because it's not overlapping anywhere, it's not actually welded to that shape. Now you have a choice to make next. So if I come back out of here, we can weld this dot here to the stroke of this T if we want to, or we can keep it separate. So decisions, and there is no right or wrong answer, it is entirely down to personal preference. Now personally, to keep it more legible, what I would say is actually keep it separate in this occasion. So I'm going to make sure that I have mine separate. So let's have a look in our layers. Our main body of our word is actually above the dots of our eyes, so I'm going to drag that down so that we know that the dots of the eyes are in front. And obviously if we were to cut this out at the moment, those eyes are going to be, the dots of the eyes are going to be floating around in space because there's nothing for them to actually stick to give us a reference. So now what we need to do is we actually need to do an offset of the entire group. So we're going to make sure that we're selecting the group. So in Affinity, you can just click on the group and it'll be selected. In Illustrator, you need to make sure that this blue square here is lit. So I can actually click all these layers in the layers palette in Illustrator and it doesn't change my selection, which is something to bear in mind. but so long as that blue square's there, we know that's the currently selected item. So in Affinity, again, you're going to want to do a duplicate of that group so that you can use your contour tool to work directly onto the new copy of the group. And in Illustrator, we can go to Path and Offset Path, and it's going to put an offset around all of those paths in that group. So it's not treating it as a welded shape, it's going to still look at them individually. Okay, now we want to go outwards because we want to build a support, and it may be that we need to do 2 or 3 offsets to get our full support in. So let's try it, and we'll go for 2mm offset. Okay, so at 2mm we're going to have enough to hold together our dots of our eyes to our actual main body of our text. We're joining our text there, so that's good. And we can go OK. And you're going to see that in your group now you actually have 2 copies of everything, so that basically it's keeping that as a group. But what I would suggest doing at this point is going, okay, we actually need to split that group into 2 so that you have them as separate entities. So how can you do it? We're going to take the shapes and take them out. So we can see which ones are selected at the moment with our blue squares. So we can just drag those that are highlighted blue out of that group, like so. Because if we were to press group while it was still within that group, it's just going to do a group within a group. So then we can do a group, and we've got our shadow layer. Now obviously our narrow one is at the bottom, so we just need to drag that up to the top. And we need to show that there's a difference between the 2. So with our group selected, we're going to go to swatches, and let's just pick a grey so that we can see that we have an outline. Okay, so far so good.
You need to weld the group.
You do indeed. So once you're happy that everything is overlapping, then you are going to be welding, as Ian says. He's jumping ahead, leaps and bounds. So we're going to select the group and make sure we get the right one, which is the black one. We're then going to go to Pathfinder and we're going to go to Weld. Like so. Now in Affinity you may need to ungroup first to get the results that you're looking for. Now with that all welded, we can get in here and we can go, okay, there's a few bits and pieces that just aren't going to be right. So let's do a little bit of tidying. And I'm just going to take out those little tiny cuts in here that probably wouldn't work that well. Now you could round all this off, so if I go to my little node tool and click, it's got all our nodes now selected. So pick a node, any node, and we can just weld that back. Now if it does this and it won't move, that means somewhere there is something where there is 2 nodes too close together to be able to do the weld, the corner rounding. So what can you do? Let's do it one at a time. So I'm just going to shrink this back, because it may be that the one that's causing an issue actually doesn't need to round. It takes a little bit longer, but I'm just going to trim this off here, and it's going to give us much neater finish, and the cutter is going to like us that a little bit more because it's not having to do lots of acute detail. Now don't forget to do the ones inside as well. So if I go to this node here, now this looks like it might be the one where there's an issue. So it's not giving us our little corner rounded tool. So let's round this off. So I want it to go around there, and then I'm just going to round that off there. Okay, and you can do the same down here with the handle. So this one in here, where it's going to try and make our INRT a bit more legible, just check just how small that actual bit is. So sometimes you can manage to get it so that it's an individual item. If not, you can use divide and do it that way. So just want to get in there. Come on, let me select those. Like so. I'm just going to take that out. It doesn't need it. And that bit in there is not too bad. Just make sure that you're happy with that little bit of a kink just there, so we can actually round that off. And we can do that same on our text here too, so if something looks a bit weird, just fix it there. Okay, so we can see here our text rounds, but for whatever reason, when we did the offset, it's gone to a point. So we can just follow that round there, and we can do the same here, because again, our letter rounds. We're just going to round it off there. We're going to do the same at the bottom of our H. And take it a little bit further that side. There we go. Now, when we did our C, we can see there, that's where our two nodes are close together. So that is why we're struggling to do our corner rounding. So let's go in there, and we can just pull that back. There. Let's grab that handle, and we're just going to pull that round. And then we've got a nice rounded corner here. Now we can go into this one and we can pull that back. If it goes, come on, let me get to that one on its own. There we go. Ah, no, it's not going to want to do a round. So what it's doing at the moment is it's trying to basically do a bevel edge rather than a corner round. So we can go, actually, that's not what we want. So if we go into corners, just make sure that it's one round. Nice and easy. There you go. And up here we can do the same, just soften that point, and then we've got a really weird one here. So you're definitely going to want to pull that one back. Right back to there. So we've gone from having lots of pointy text to having nice smooth edges. And just set and check the tip of the T too up here, because again it's rounded there, so it should be rounded here. An interesting one, because that looks like that's not jointed there. So if something doesn't look like it's joined, if you select 2 points and come up to the top, you can see here that it has, for whatever reason, lost connection. So we can join it, and then we can see that our corner rounding will then work like so. Now just be aware that we need to make sure that before we do that, we only select the one node. So just want to do that bit there, because everything else is fine. And there we go. So we have our text. So all well and good so far. Now let's make life a little bit easier for our readers, shall we? And we can actually add a border that's going to make our word actually make a bit more sense in terms of visually. So let's go back to our middle group, and we can duplicate that if you want to work on a copy safely, or we can work directly on this one. So I think I'm just going to literally copy and then paste in place. So that's going to put us a duplicate of the group in exactly the same place. In Affinity you can do your normal Control or Command J to just do a duplicate. It's a lot easier. Onto this copy we are going to do a bit of a flick around so that we're going to basically look at the outline. So if I put this in white so you can see what I'm doing, and we can go to stroke and we can choose where we're going to align our stroke to. So if ever you've wondered what these buttons are actually used for, this is what we're going to be using it for today. We're actually going to create an outline, but we want to finish in line with the original text. So what we want to do is have the stroke go around the inside like so. Now because we're going to be cutting this stroke rather than drawing it, we're going to want it to be a little bit bigger. So I'm going to go not so big that it's going to kind of lose too much detail, but like that. We can choose how it's going to go around the corners, so we can go for rounded corners or pointed corners. I would go for a nice rounded corner. Okay, so far so good. And what we then want to do is want to actually expand that stroke. So if we go to our object, object path, then outline stroke, and it's going to create that stroke as a shape. So that we've got both inside and outside cut lines, and that's an important step to do to make sure that we can cut it properly. So this is going to create a nice border around our text, but if we look at this dot of the eye here, and we'll zoom in a bit, you can see that our outline for our T is going through the dot of our eye. Now because we left that original dot of our eye separate, we can actually lift it up and put it over the top, or you can make it so that that line there disappears. So it's entirely up to you. So I'm going to go into my layers palette, and we can pinch whichever eye it is. There we go. And I'm going to take that and pop it inside the group. Now it's going to put it at the top of that group. You're going to think, but my stroke's gone. No, because the stroke lines up on its outside edge of this shape here, it's just being covered. So we can just drag it down like so. Nice, simple, easy. Saves you faffing about with lots of commands to be able to do that cut. So everything works fine apart from that S now looks a bit odd. So how can you fix it? So we've got this bit here and then this bit here, and it just looks a bit ooh. So what I would recommend doing in this case is we're going to get into isolation mode so that we've got that particular element isolated. We're going to make sure that that shape is selected. We can then go to our pencil tool and we can go, okay, if we look at this flow here, I would expect that S to be a bit more out here. Now you can see how shaky my hand is. That's terrible. But you can see that even though it's appallingly bad, Illustrator still fixes it for me. Yeah, I know, I put my graphics tablet there and I'm not using it. So I'm just going to do a couple of traces just to get that where I want it. Whoop, no, not like that. Undo. There we go. So I've got this line here a bit better, but this bit down the bottom is still a bit wonky donkey. It just doesn't look like it's quite making sense. So let's just take that down there. And that's a bit better. Just taking that line down rather than trying to make it look like it's curving back. So when I'm doing this, I'm mindful of where my outline underneath is. And just make sure that whatever you do on the inside, you match on the outside of the line too. And that's looking a lot better. This bit here I'm just going to fix nice and easily by just rounding it off. It just looks better that way. And there we go. So that reads a lot better. So all these layers are going to have a kind of drop shadow effect because they'll be 3D'd up. So that's something to bear in mind. And with that text, we can then move it back to our topper layer here. And we'll move that whole bunch back onto the mat so that we're within our working area. Now, with that back grey layer, so this one here, we're going to want to do a copy and paste in place. Okay, it's going to bring it to the front, or Command J on Affinity. I'm going to press and hold Shift and select that red layer, and we are going to go to our Pathfinder and we're going to weld like so. Now because it's changed our colour, I'm just going to pop it back in red, and we can go to our layers and we can sort that layer order out, so it's going to pop behind, and that then means that our text is going to be well and truly supported. And you can do the same with the other layer so that you have that kind of all neatly backed off at the back. Because the other thing to bear in mind is when we're doing this, if I copy this, and I'm going to paste it down here, if I go to transform and reflect it, is we're going to see this from the back. So let's do a centre back. We're going to send that to the back, send that to the back, and I'm going to send that back one and bring this to the front. So let's make that so it's transparent for a moment. So that is essentially what you're going to see from the back. So you either need to do then something that's going to cover that area in a design, or make it so that for whatever reason that cake is only going to be seen from the front. So just bear that in mind, how that's going to look from the back, so you can then build up the same layers in the same way for your frame, and then do something different that is going to be visible. But likewise, when you do the back, do the same exercise, so that you flip it back round. You can see it underneath this side here, just to make sure that you're happy with how it's going to look before you do any cutting at all. Saves you wasting any material.
lollipop, would you not just do the same but flipped anyway, so you have the same both sides and stick it together?
The only thing I would say about that is if we take this copy here, so let's group all that as one, and I'm going to group all this as one. Right, let's take this group, and I'm going to send that to the back. So that is how it looks. So if you're happy with how it looks when you do that, then you don't have to worry, and you can just relayer it up the same on both sides. But it's worth kind of having that exercise of actually checking, because some words will work, some words really won't. But the other option, as a way of getting around it, is if you put like a design element that you can reverse. So let's say if you put the cupcake sort of design in there, because cupcakes tend to be that you've got your cake and then you've got candle straight up in the middle, and that would reverse out, so that you could kind of put it in there and then match it this side with one there, and then it hides what's the other side basically. What I would say is, just to prove a point, is if I just knock that one out there too, so you would need to do similar in here as well. So good one to kind of practice and have fun with. So that's kind of your initial cake topper design, up to the point where you're actually going to start creating your themed elements. So I hope you've had fun with that, and I'd love to see what you come up with. So you can theme these for bonfire, giving away what the blog post is going to be about. You could do Christmas ones, you could use it for one big cake, you could use it for lots of little cupcakes and you just scale it down accordingly. You could do both at the same time, so you could do like one big one and then lots of little ones.
Halloween?
Yeah, Halloween.
Valentine's?
Yeah.
Easter? Birthday?
Ooh. So, hope you've had fun, and we will see you Thursday. So Thursday's classes will be available for members. So watch this space as to how we'll enable that to happen. But I will put up details on to the Facebook page. So take care for now, and bye.